of those who live under the persecution of oppressive governments. Time and again, we've heard these accounts, but his leadership is what has kept the concerns forefront in the minds of so many of us in Congress. Chairman, I could not express to you my gratitude or respect for you anymore. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much. What a tremendous man Robert Pittenger is. He's been an inspiration before he came to Congress. He radiates the love of Christ in all that he does, and it's so apparent. We miss him on Capitol Hill, that is for sure, but just a great man of God and a purpose. There's such a purpose. So I can't thank him enough for his leadership, because it has made a huge difference. You know, Robert mentioned a moment ago, 45 years. Well, 45 years ago, I did read, during my first term, a book called Tortured for Christ by Richard Wurmbrand, which many of you know about and I'm sure have read. It changed my life. It's a book that tells the story of Wurmbrand's and his wife's and the Christians in Romania, the plight that they suffered under Nicholas Ceausescu, who was the dictator at the time, and his dreaded Securitate, which is the equivalent of the KGB in the Soviet Union. Ruthless beyond words, and yet he persevered for his faith. I was moved to tears when I read it. I read it many times since. You know, I start getting mad over some of the editorials I get and the bad press that I get, because I am very pro-life and I don't get good press at all. I just remember that, what he and his like-minded Christians went through in those prisons. It was just unbelievable. There was a time when he was so tired and so beaten down, because they used every trick in the book to break your spirit and your body. He tried to pray the Lord's Prayer, and he started, "Our Father," and then he goes, "I've forgotten the prayer, but surely you know it by heart." It was just an amazing man, and his wife, equally strong and devoted, and it has changed. I mean, our good friend, Robert, Frank Wolf, he too was greatly inspired by Pastor Wurmbrand. Frank was an amazing leader for religious freedom, the author of the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, which is the landmark law on religious freedom, made all the difference. And I have to tell you, it was not a slam dunk getting it passed. I chaired the hearings on it in my Human Rights Subcommittee, and John Shattuck, who was the Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, testified against it. It said it would do more harm than good. It would be counterproductive to the cause that he claimed, at least, that he was in favor of religious freedom. And nothing could be further from the truth. And Frank just persevered and got it passed and signed into law. One of the things that Wurmbrand had said, he called on us as Christians, as believers, not to enable evil by our naivete. Know what it is that we're up against and don't go along with it naively. He said, don't be indifferent. And he often talked in the book about how the hammer and sickle was right next to crossed flags with some Christian symbols. And he said, what an outrage that was. And he also hit us for cowardly complicity. Religious persecution, as I think all of you know, is festering all over the world. What was unconscionable for decades has even become more unconscionable. It is bad, and it is getting worse. And among the greatest threats are communism and radical Islamists. There are other threats to Christianity, but those two are the lion's share of what is being done against believers. I would also say, I'll never forget, my first trip to the Soviet Union was on behalf of Soviet Jews. I met with refuseniks while I was there, wonderful men and women, the leading teacher of Hebrew, Yuli Kasharovsky in Moscow. And in talking to them, and they had such a perspective that I just was, again, admired greatly. I remember one of them told me the story, it was a joke, I guess, but he says, Khrushchev went to a factory and he asked the man, do you believe in God? And he said, at home, yes. but not here. And there are a lot of people, including in this institution, the House and Senate, who check their faith outside the door, and I don't know what they're operating under, but it's not their faith. So it was a telling thing to me. Open Doors has said that there are 380 million Christians suffering high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith as we meet here right now in 2025. And more than ever before, vigorous U.S. leadership is needed to address these religious violations globally and to end the persecution. In December of 2020, President Trump designated Nigeria a country of particular concern, a CPC country. And with that comes about 12.5 prescribed sanctions that at the discretion of the president can be leveled against that country. And the simplest is a demarche, that's a nothing. But the others are very real in terms of economic and other sanctions. And it also includes the ability to go after individuals, not just the country, but individuals who are egregious violators. And to my shock, when President Biden came in, he reversed it. And Anthony Blinken went to Abuja, Nigeria, and just said it's no longer in effect. And the faith community went into overdrive in its criticism because they said, based on what? You know, this terrible, terrible killing of Christians is going on every single day by Boko Haram, by the Fulani, by ISIS West Africa, and others. And it's just horrific. And yet, I asked Blinken at 2 hearings, what was your criteria? He had no criteria. It's all on the record. One of the bishops said that the persecution is more intense than ever. Genocide Watch called Nigeria a killing field of defenseless Christians. On November 20th, I chaired my 12th hearing exclusively on Nigeria, and one of the witnesses, a bishop, said, an abbé, militant Fulani herdsmen are terrorists. They steal and vandalize, they kill and boast about it, they kidnap and rape, and they enjoy total impunity from elected officials. None of them have been arrested or brought to justice. Well, that's about to change. On October 31st, President Trump boldly designated Nigeria a country of particular concern, and right now is in the process, and he's asking us, House and Senate members and others, to give him ideas of what it ought to look like in terms of implementation, and he means it. And of course, our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is a true human rights defender, so that we can take action against this government. Parenthetically, I met with about 15 members of their highest echelon of leadership in a room over in Rayburn Building on the other side of the Capitol. Hour and 45 minutes. They were in total denial, culture of total denial, that this has anything to do with Christians. It's hooliganism. It's people who just want land. And I said, you know, as they're screaming radical Islamic statements as they're butchering people, and I did go to some of those churches 13 years ago in Jos, Nigeria, that had been firebombed and killed with AK-47s. Don't tell me that that's the case. But they wouldn't believe it. They were in total denial. They even said that the bishops are lying when it comes to, which is not just an insult, but it's an insult to the truth. Insult to them and to the truth. You know, I know that, Robert, I'm not sure how much time you want me to talk, but I would just conclude that I mentioned communism and radical Islamists as the 2 greatest threats to our faith, but in all faiths, you know, one of the things that reminds me of what Hamas does to the Palestinians. You can't be a moderate Palestinian or a non-radical and get through UNRWA and the indoctrination that starts when you're this big. 20 years ago, I offered legislation that passed the House to say no more U.S. funding for UNRWA, UN Relief Works Agency, which is a child soldier factory in Gaza and in the Middle East, and failed in the Senate. Never got a vote, which to my shock. But it didn't happen. So Trump has turned that money off as well for very, very good reasons. Finally, I just want to say with regards to China, again, that's the communist example. There are many others. If you look at Vietnam, North Korea, where Christians are being singled out, and in Vietnam, it's forced conversions, which take place among the Hmong. I've had a bill 3 times pass the House called the Vietnam Human Rights and Democracy Act. Big, heavy emphasis on religious freedom. 3 times it came over here and got killed, and they just spiked it. So those kind of things trouble me in the extreme. Okay, tell me why. We never give a reason as to why. But under this Xi Jinping, he's doing things that Joseph Mengele would like back in the Nazi Germany era. One of them is they're killing men and women, average age 28, tens of thousands every year, mostly Uyghurs because they want Muslim body parts, or Falun Gong, or Christians, and the Tibetan Buddhists, about 50 to 70,000 a year to get their organs. Forced organ harvesting. And the reason why they're targeting the Uyghurs is that most of the Uyghurs are Muslim, and they have a huge market in the Middle East where they're selling body parts, and in the Middle East they want Muslim body parts. I mean, talk about perverse. I'm all for voluntary donations. You get killed in a car accident, not forced. So I've had 5 hearings on it, and one of them we had a doctor who actually did them, and he stood there and said, it dawned on him, there's a person here, I'm killing him to get their organs. He did it because he was under orders, but he did do it. I mean, these are crimes against humanity, and it's especially targeted at the Muslims in Xinjiang. And I have a bill that would completely criminalize that supply chain, passed 406 to 1 twice, last Congress and this Congress, and I can't get it out of the United States Senate. They won't even take it up. So it's things, we have not been faithful to the victims the way we could be. I was in the ICU a couple years ago, nothing bad, but I was there for a little while. And I remember I kept thinking of some poor 28-year-old, either male or female, who's now been put down on that bed to take their organs, and they can't get up, they can't leave, they're strapped to the bed. And that's going on right now, forced organ harvesting. And we would criminalize it up to 20 years in prison for anybody who knowingly procures such an organ. It would really be focused on the brokers of the organs, and of course the Chinese Communist Party apparatchiks who will be doing these kinds of things would be sanctioned with Magnitsky type sanctions unless they come here. Then we would arrest them. And again, 406 to 1 in this politicized atmosphere that we have. You don't get votes like that, because I think my colleagues on the House side realize this is just outrageous that this is going on every day. So I just call on you to keep that in mind, and if you know any senators that could help get it passed, I've asked Senator Risch, who's the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, just mark it up. It'll pass, but it hasn't happened. So again, I want to encourage each and every one of you to keep working with this man over here. Because Robert Pittenger, when he was on the China Commission, he was outstanding, speaking out for human rights, which are trashed every single day by Xi Jinping. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and God bless you.